Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Spruce Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 3 college football rankings. So, starting off by briefly recapping last week's rankings and what those teams did in Week 2. Last week at number 10, I had Arizona State. They were upset by Mississippi State, losing 24-20. Ninth, I had Notre Dame. They were on a bye. 8th was Clemson. They beat Troy 27-16. 7th was Texas. They easily beat San Jose State 38-7. 6 was Georgia. They beat Austin Peay 28-6. 5, I had Oregon. They demolished Oklahoma State, winning 69-3. 4 was Miami. They destroyed Bethune-Cookman, winning 45-3. 3rd, I had LSU. They beat Louisiana Tech 25-7. 2nd was Penn State. They beat FIU 34-0. And 1 was Ohio State, who dominated Grambling, winning 70-0. But getting into this week's rankings, beginning things at number 10, I've got Illinois. So Illinois enters my top 10 at number 10 after they beat Duke by a final score of 45-19. And this was a game that was a little bit closer than the score suggests, but this was still a good performance for Illinois. The offense for Illinois was great, especially through the air. Quarterback Luke Altmaier threw for 296 yards and 3 touchdowns, and receiver Hank Beatty caught 8 passes for 128 yards and also had a touchdown on the ground. Now, running the ball, Illinois wasn't their best at just 2.9 yards per carry, although the pass game was great. Then defensively for Illinois, they played pretty well. They forced 5 turnovers, and they completely shut down the Duke rushing attack. But this was a good win for Illinois on the road at a Duke team that I think is pretty good, and I've got Illinois coming in at number 10. Ninth, I have Clemson. So I have Clemson dropping spot from number 8 to number 9 after they beat Troy 27-16. And this was a bad game for Clemson. They actually trailed 16-0 midway through the second quarter before they started to get going and outscored Troy 27-0 the rest of the way. But this game for Clemson wasn't great. The offense was not impressive, especially through the air, as Cade Klubnik threw for just 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Although receiver Bryant Wesco did have a big game, as he had 7 catches for 118 yards and 2 scores. And on the ground, Clemson, they were okay. Running back Adam Randall played well with 112 yards and a touchdown, although outside of him, they ran for just 8 yards. Now, the defense for Clemson, they got off to a slow start, allowing 16 points in the first half, but they were much better in the second half, not allowing a point. But this was a bad performance for Clemson. I'm starting to worry about their offense a little bit after not a great game last week against LSU, and now struggling this week for at least the first half against Troy. It doesn't look great. Now, I do think they'll figure it out, but not a great start to the season for Clemson, and because of that, I've got them falling a spot to number 9. 8th, I have Notre Dame. So Notre Dame actually moves up a spot to number 8 as a result of me dropping Clemson, but Notre Dame, they didn't play this week. Next week, they play Texas A&M. Number 7, I've got Georgia. So Georgia, they fall a spot after they beat Austin Peay 28-6, and this was an okay performance, because you would definitely expect a lot better against an FCS team. But offensively for Georgia, they were okay. They put up 28 points, and that's definitely nothing too crazy. But quarterback Gunnar Stockton was okay, as he threw for 227 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions. Now on the ground, Georgia was good, as they did run for 190 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of things, Georgia, they dominated. They allowed just 6 points and had Austin Peay to under 200 yards. But Georgia, a lot like Clemson this week, not a great performance against a team they're a lot better than, but I've got Georgia falling a spot to number 7. 6, I have Texas. So I've got Texas at 6 after Georgia falls to 7, and Texas, they beat San Jose State 38-7. And this was definitely a good bounce-back win for Texas. Arch Manning looked a lot better for Texas, and he looked like the guy we all expected him to be. And he had a great game, as he threw for 295 yards, 4 touchdowns and a pick, and he also ran for another touchdown. And then receiver Parker Livingstone also had a good game, as he had 4 catches for 128 yards and found the end zone twice. And then the defense for Texas, they looked good once again. They allowed just 7 points and forced 4 turnovers. But this was a good bounce-back performance for Texas. They definitely needed to get the win here, and they did so in pretty convincing fashion, and I've got them at number 6. 5th, I have Oregon. So Oregon comes in at number 5, and they destroyed Oklahoma State, winning 69-3. And this is a crazy performance, especially against a Power 4 team. But the offense for Oregon was insane. Dante Moore played really well, as he threw for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he made some really good downfield throws. And then the run game for Oregon, they were also insane, as they ran for 312 yards and 5 touchdowns, while averaging 8.4 yards per carry. And then defensively for Oregon, they were also dominant, allowing just 3 points and 211 total yards. But this is a ridiculous performance for Oregon, especially against a Power 4 team that just a few years ago was pretty good. But Oregon, after a dominant performance, I've got them at number 5. 4, I have Miami. So Miami, they've remained at number 4 after they easily beat Bethune-Cookman 45-3. Quarterback Carson Beck played pretty well, going 22 for 24 for 267 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Miami, they also ran the ball effectively, rushing for about 200 yards and 4 scores. And then on the defensive side of things, they were great, allowing just 3 points, under 200 yards, and forcing a couple turnovers. But Miami, they did what you would expect against an FCS team, and I've got them at number 4. Third, I have LSU. So LSU remains at number 3, and they were another team this week that wasn't great, as LSU beat Louisiana Tech 23-7. And the offense for LSU is a little concerning. They put up just 23 points, and that's definitely not what you would expect when they're playing Louisiana Tech. But quarterback Garrett Nussmeier was okay, as he threw for 237 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And on the ground, LSU also wasn't anything too impressive, with just 128 yards and a touchdown. Now, the defense for LSU dominated again, allowing just 7 points and 154 yards. But I'm going to keep LSU at 3. If you want to drop LSU to 4 and put Miami at 3, I don't have a problem with that, but I do have LSU at number 3. Second, I have Penn State. So Penn State, they come in at number 2 after they beat FIU 34-0. And they were another top 10 team that was less than impressive this week. Now, you might look at the final score and say 34-0 isn't terrible, but this game was actually pretty close for a while. As Penn State, they were up just 10 points at the half, and they were up 13-0 late in the third quarter, before the offense started to get going. But quarterback Drew Allar was not that good for the second straight week, as he threw for just 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he's not terrible, but he's not playing like a top 5 quarterback like people think he is. But he was okay. Now, the run game for Penn State was pretty good, as they ran for 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then defensively, Penn State was great, not allowing a single point and forcing 2 turnovers. But Penn State, they weren't great. They weren't terrible, but definitely not their best game. I thought about dropping them to number 3, but when LSU wasn't great, I don't really think I could. Plus, I don't think you can justify moving Miami from number 4 to number 2 just for beating an FCS team. But even though Penn State didn't play their best game, I do have them staying at number 2. And coming in at number 1, I've got Ohio State. So Ohio State, they destroyed Grambling 70-0, and this was a pretty good game for Ohio State. Quarterback Julian Sayin threw for 306 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Jeremiah Smith had 5 catches for 119 yards and 2 scores. And Ohio State, they were also great on the ground, running for 274 yards and another 4 touchdowns. And the defense for Ohio State was also great, not allowing a single point. But this was a great game for Ohio State. They did what you expect when they play Grambling, and I've got Ohio State at 1. And here are my updated college football playoff predictions. Not a ton changed, but there are a couple changes. The first one is I now have Iowa State as that 4 seed winning the Big 12 instead of Arizona State. Because obviously Arizona State lost to Mississippi State. The playoff is definitely still a possibility for them, although I think a little bit less likely. And then another change I made, I shuffled around the order of the seeds 7 through 10. Because now that Florida lost to South Florida, I think Miami is going to beat Florida in a couple weeks. And that would put Miami up to 11 wins. So I put Miami to the 7 seed, and I knocked a couple other teams down a spot. And then the final thing I do want to talk about is I didn't change the group of 5 playoff spot. I still have Tulane. But obviously South Florida upset Florida, and they have a good chance to make the college football playoff. And I think Tulane and South Florida are going to meet in the AAC championship game. I just think Tulane wins that game. So I've got them remaining as my group of 5 conference champion. But those are my week 3 college football rankings and my updated college football playoff predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you next video.